Aloha, namaste. This is Alexis Cox with Radha Home Yoga, and I'm here to bring you your new moon forecast for this coming Wednesday, March 6th. It's going to be at 8:04 a.m. Pacific Standard Time, and this new moon also marks the end of Maha Shivaratri. This is the great night of Shiva, the great night of Lord Shiva, who is the destroyer of our ego, of our attachments in this world, and is literally consciousness itself. So when the moon goes through its phase every month, where it fades to dark in the new moon, we go through the different phases, and there's the 13th phase, and then there's the 14th phase, and then the 15th phase is where we have that new or full moon, depending on if we're waxing or waning. Every time we get to that 13th phase of the waning phase, where we're moving into the new moon, it's considered a Shivaratri. It's considered a night of Shiva. And the reason is because that's when our mind is fading to black. It's when the moon and the sun are in the same placement, and that reflective light that the sun casts on the moon in the full moon, where we're fully illumined and engaged with the world and outside of ourselves, is darkened. And instead, they're on top of each other. They're united. They're one. Shiva, consciousness, and Shakti, manifestation, are one and the same. And in this placement, we have capacity to find deep meditative qualities within ourselves. We're not as attached to the world around us. We're not as attached to our emotions, to our ego, to our thoughts that go up and down. We're more able to tune into truth and to consciousness itself. And so those little Shivaratris that happen every month are beautiful times to meditate always. This time in the month of Falgun, it's kind of like the February-March month because it's based on a lunar calendar, so it's different than our Gregorian calendar months. This month marks Maha Shivaratri, so it's the Great Shivaratri. And the reason is because this is also the time of year when winter is coming to a close. So it's the great fade and about to birth into spring. So we are all able to take stock of everything as it dies, because that's literally what's happening in a way. Our mind is almost dying. We're experiencing a death of attachment, a death of the ego, and a fading to blackness, a fading to dark, and to, of course, oneness. So everything feels good or bad in our world, but it is not good or bad. It's not the way that we look at things from a Vedic perspective. We look at everything as moving us closer to our Dharma, to our truth, or farther from that truth. And in this case, the capacity to go in and to connect the manifest world with the unmanifest world is closer to truth. And so it is an opportunity for us to negate our attachments and to be one with our true self. In India, in really all over the world at this point, there will be people who are meditating, who are practicing austerities, allowing themselves to, refrain from eating or talking. Many people will not sleep, and they will pray or chant in groups of people, but it's not a social event. It's not where people are gathering to chat and talk and share thoughts and ideas. It's where everybody's practicing the art of letting go, releasing, and destroying the ego, quite literally. There are many chants to Shiva. You can do something as simple as just meditating on Om, which is the primordial sound. You can say Om Namah Shivaya, Om Namah Shivaya. There's also longer chants to Shiva. One of the more well-known chants to Shiva that honors that destruction and that death that ultimately leads to our rebirth, our death of our ego that leads to our immortal existence, where we are beyond death, is the Maha Mrityam mantra. And it goes like this. It's Om Trayambakam Yajamahe Sugandim Pushti Vardhanam Urvaru Kamiva Bandhanam Mrityor Mokshamam Ritat. Om. People often invoke that mantra for dangerous situations or situations when they feel like they could die. But actually, it's, like I said, it's about the death of your ego. So it's a death that you're welcoming, and it's dangerous feeling to our ego to die. It's the ego does not want to die. There is a beautiful story of Shiva, and I know it in a retelling. I know it in a telling from a collection that is called Ganesha Goes to Lunch. It's a great book of stories on the different myths, and in it, Arjuna, the great warrior, who's known from the Bhagavad Gita, he's the best archer of all of his brothers. He's the one who can shoot that arrow and get it right into the eye of in the story. There's a bird, a parrot that's been painted, a fake bird that's been painted and put in a tree, and their master is having them all shoot for that eye, and he's the only one who can get it. And the reason is because he doesn't notice all the distraction around him. He just sees that one pointed focus, and he goes for it. So they send him up the mountaintop to go seek Lord Shiva, because they're about to have this great battle on the battlefield, the Bhagavad Gita. They're about to fight their cousins, their family, and they need all the help they can get. So they want to ask Shiva for the great weapons, the weapons of the gods. So Arjuna climbs this craggy mountain, and he pulls himself through snowy terrain and rough terrain and gray terrain and all kinds of things. And the first time he comes to a tier, everything is suddenly bright green and gem-studded, and the flowers are blooming and sweet smells, and he sees a pair of feet dangling down, and he says, oh, where am I? I've been in this sort of hellacious mountain. And he looks up and sees this vagabond character who's swigging out of a cup, and he offers him the cup and says, this is the soma, man. This is the immortal elixir. This is where the bliss is at. Take this and you'll forget about everything else. And Arjuna says, I don't want to forget about everything else. I have a mission. I have a goal. I have to go to the top of this mountain and meet Lord Shiva himself and get those weapons so my family can protect our birthright. And the vagabond's like, forget about that. One sip of this and you'll forget all about your wars and your struggles and your family. And Arjuna says, absolutely not. And then he says, well, here, have a sip of water at least. And Arjuna says, okay, I'll have some water. And he takes the cup, and the cup shatters, and the vagabond transforms to Lord Indra, who's the king of the gods in the Vedic text. And he says, congratulations, you passed your first test. You were not distracted by the garden of pleasure. You were not distracted by this. So Arjuna continues to go, he continues to climb through the worst terrain ever, and then he gets to the top. And again, there's some greenery, but this time it's not as gem-studded, it's not so glittery. And he thinks, this is a good place for me to sit and meditate, because of course that's what I would do for Lord Shiva. I would meditate, I would practice austerity. And so he builds himself a little space, and he forms a little statue, a little murti of Lord Shiva. And then he takes the flowers that are around. Again, it's not so ornate and gem covered as the first place, but there's flowers around and there's still a sweet smell. So he collects the flowers and he makes this beautiful garland. And he takes the garland and places it on the statue. And he sits and meditates. And he's in deep, deep connection. That space where we find Shiva, where we find consciousness itself. When all of a sudden he hears a rustling in the leaves behind him. Being the great archer that he is, he quickly turns around, shoots an arrow. Doesn't even have to see his mark to know he catches it. And then he goes into the woods to see what he what he killed. And it's a pig. But he sees next to his arrow, there's another arrow. And he looks around. Uh-oh, something else is here too, right? He only shot one arrow. And he sees this horrendous monster come out of the woods. And the monster says, that's my pig. He says, no, I shot it. And I'm here, so I got it. The monster says, no, it's mine. And he's huge. And he has big teeth. And he is gruesome. And he walks towards Arjuna and picks him up like he's a twig and shakes him and says, oh yeah, tough guy, you're going to fight me now? And Arjuna, who's so brave and has always had courage, suddenly starts to shake and tremble. He's genuinely scared. This creature is massive and disgusting, and his teeth have pieces of human whatever. I don't want to gross you out. But he's clearly a threat. And Arjuna tries to, distract him and get a little extra time. He says, well, let's fight, put me back down and we'll fight man to man, and the monster laughs. And he starts to bring him towards his mouth, and Arjuna blacks out. He wakes up. He comes to on the ground. He's like, was that just a bad dream? And he looks at his body. It's pretty bruised, and he's pretty cut up. And he looks over and he sees the monster is just sitting there. He's like, well, that's odd, I wonder why he didn't kill me. He's like, maybe I'm in a dream, or maybe Shiva came to protect me. And then he sees that the monster's wearing the garland that he created for Shiva. And he's like, no, I don't care how tough you are. I don't care how scary you are. I am getting that back because that was my gift to Shiva. So he runs towards the monster and says, give me that. And the monster bucks him off. But he manages to get the garland and he puts it back on the statue. And as he kind of pulls himself up off the ground, he looks and he sees the garland is back on the monster again. What is going on here? He runs at him again. He's like, you can't have that. And he tries to take it off again. Before he can even get it onto the Murti, it bounces back to the monster. And he starts to sit down, and realization comes over him. And he's like, oh my God, the monster is Shiva. And then Shiva transforms to his glorious form, to his blue-throated form, to his all-attractive form, to his dreadlocked Ganga hair form, and the crescent moon on his forehead. Arjuna says, oh my Lord, I'm so sorry. How did I not recognize you? How could I not see that that was you? And he bows down, and Shiva says, you have to recognize me in even the ugliest, in even the most gruesome, in even the most fearsome. And Arjuna realizes his mistake, that God, oneness, is not just beautiful, just this all-attractive form that we want it to be. It's also in the ugliest, in the most terrible things on this earth. And he sees that and he feels that within him. And then at that point, Shiva hands him the great weapons. He says, why are you giving me this? Why are you giving me this Gandiva bow? This is for a warrior who could defeat his fear. I was terrified. I was shaking. I was calling to you for help. And Shiva said, yes, you even need to recognize me in your failures, in your own shortcomings, and in your fear. And this is the part of us that we're all traversing through right now, because we've had Jupiter and Scorpio, where we've really been taking that deep dive into ourselves, where we've been facing our fears. And right now, for the past few weeks, we've had Mars staring at that Jupiter and offering some courage, some strength, some of that Arjuna energy to really walk the path. And this new moon is in Purva Bhadrapada, which is the lightning flash that offers us a glimpse. It allows us to see there's a door, and that we could walk through that door, and on the other side of that door is oneness, is truth, is reality. But it doesn't mean we've walked through the door. It doesn't mean we've walked the path or we've done all the different things we need to do. But it means that we've seen that glimpse and that we know. And that's where Arjuna's at in the story. He gets it. He knows, like, wow, yeah, that, I'm seeing it. But he's not realized all of a sudden. He still needs to go to the whole Bhagavad Gita. He still needs to fight on the battlefield. But he's been given a glimpse. And he now knows there's more than what he understood before. And so there's something for him to work with. There's something for him to move forward on the path with, in his case, a physical bow and arrow from the gods. And so this is where we're at right now, that lightning flash, that glimpse, that awareness that there's more. Purva Bhadrapada is a bridge between Aquarius and Pisces. And this new moon is in Aquarius. It's 19 degrees Aquarius. So we're seeing the part where the knowledge comes in, where the intellect comes in, where that air sign energy comes in, where we can imagine new frontiers and we can imagine new paradigms and we can see it. Even in our country, in the US, I'm rarely a political person, but you can see how the people are lining up to be the new sort of social party leader. People are saying, I want to be president, I want to be president, and it's all these really, different candidates than we've had before that are all pretty much for the social good as they see it. We're seeing more and more people concerned about what is good for society as opposed to their own personal power. And I spoke about this 2 weeks ago in the full moon for Leo, where we were contrasting that with our power in Leo. But because the full moon of Leo came before the new moon offset the cycle in Aquarius, we sort of had the contrast before we actually had the new cycle begin. And now the new cycle is setting off. And it is all about these new ways of doing things and these new paradigms. When Purva Bhadrapada moves into the Pisces area, we start to get more spiritual, more connected, and more faith-driven as we continue on that path. And the next star, Uttara Bhadrapada, is where we really have to do the work, where we have to, fight the battle on the battlefield. But this first part, this Purva Bhadrapada, is that lightning flash of awareness that it even exists at all, that there's even something more than what we've been looking at to begin with. And it's ruled by Aja Ekapada, the one-footed goat, who also has to climb up a craggy mountain, right? Just like Arjuna. And he has just 1 foot, so he must have some awareness of the terrain and also a lot of faith, right? A lot of faith to know that he can get there. And so this is where we're at right now. And furthermore, Mercury has just moved into Pisces. It moved in last week, and the retrograde cycle of Mercury is starting on the 5th, so the day before this new moon. What we see when Mercury is in Pisces is a watery nature to our intellect, our discrimination, our buddhi, our capacity to delineate fact from fiction and to sort of categorize information becomes muddled and floaty. Pisces is where we merge and where we come to our culmination of things. It's where we're seeing how everything's connected. And that can be really powerful, but it can also be very murky waters for our mind to be, trying to figure out what's right, what's wrong, what's truth, what's fiction, and to be able to make discerning choices in both our communication and in what we take in, what information we take in. It can be challenging. So this is considered to be the state of debilitation for Mercury. It's also very emotion-driven. It can be very spiritual, but it can also be very emotion-driven, especially if somebody isn't super spiritually connected. This is where we can get into things like, gossip or escape-type communication, and fantasy, the world of fantasy and illusion. But in this particular case, Mercury going retrograde on the 5th causes us to pause. It causes us to reflect. It causes us to literally slow down our intellect. And as a result of that slowed down energy, we have a capacity to see maybe as something that's a gem passes by us. So while there's all this sort of extraneous stuff and everything's together and part of the next thing and run-on sentences and all of this kind of hard to discern murky terrain, when we are slowed down, when we're in that retrograde state, we're able to maybe take a moment and grab onto something that's really powerful, that's really potent, that's really spiritually true. And with this energetic of this new moon being in Purva Bhadrapada, being in the same nakshatra, we will be more inclined towards that, more able to see that. Furthermore, Jupiter, I mentioned how Mars is giving Jupiter drishti. Well, Jupiter is giving Mercury drishti in its own sign. So we're seeing that wisdom, that generosity, that optimism, and that faith that Jupiter offers is coming to Mercury, giving that extra boost to really connect, to really allow what is coming in to be connected to something true. And Jupiter's in very good dignity in Scorpio, and we've hopefully been doing that work, that inner work, so we're more likely to capture some real gems and be able to integrate that into our consciousness and into our experience and into that mental field that Mercury rules over so much of. We have the planet Venus in Capricorn right now, so we might be less inclined towards staying in just a fantasy pleasure realm where we want to just sort of make ourselves feel good and experience pleasure and experience relationships and all these kind of things. We might be more serious about our happiness, more willing to set boundaries around what does and does not work for us, more willing to work for our own happiness, willing to go forward and do what we need to do for ourselves to become happy instead of just expecting other people to bring us happiness, and more willing to sort of create a grounded, practical plan of what that looks like. So this is a good time to sort of move away from the fantasy realm and really connect to deep spiritual principles, but in a somewhat grounded way. Purva Bhadrapada, to begin with, is the early blessed result. It's the foot. The pada is the foot. And it is just like that Aja Ekapada, the one-footed goat. And that result of walking, of physically doing something, is what is going to get us somewhere. You know, we can have the lightning glimpse, we can have the vision, but if we don't do something, then we won't go anywhere. So this is a time when we can really start to speed roll through some progress. If we take advantage of the spiritual capacity of Maha Shivaratri, if we take advantage of the capacity to sort of quiet our mind that the new moon brings us, and then allow ourselves to see that lightning glimpse and to follow it, not feeling like, oh, we've arrived, but feeling like, wow, there's a lot more work to do, but I see it and I see where it can go, and it's worth it, you know? And if I do that work, then I can get there. And Venus has actually joined the South Node right now in Capricorn. They're 10 degrees apart. Ketu, the South Node, is almost on its way out of Capricorn. And Rahu, the North Node, almost out of Cancer. But since there is still that joining, we see that we're also withdrawn from that need to be happy, or that feeling that we must be, you know, relationships are going to be the thing that we need right now, and happiness and pleasure and joy is everything we need. We're going to be more removed from that and more distanced from that, which can help us really focus on the spiritual practices and on what we need to do, the work we need to do, which is really the key here. We do have those last few weeks before Ketu moves into Sagittarius and Rahu moves into Gemini. So whatever last few things we need to do to sweep the corners and to, you know, take those last few karmic moments with Ketu and Capricorn, whatever area of your life Capricorn rules over, those external responsibilities, that hard work that needs to be done, do it, get it done with so you can move on. That karma needs to be ended. And wherever Rahu is in your chart, whatever house Cancer rules over, this is the time to sort of grab onto what what you want to bring forward with you. It's been emotional. It's been spiritual in many ways, very faith-driven, very unconditionally loving, and very much of the feminine, of the divine feminine, of the mother. And whatever we can take forward with that, without being drowning in the emotions, but being able to bring it into the realm of Gemini, where things are more about discernment, more of those Mercury qualities of facts and figures and knowing right from wrong, being able to discern fact from fiction, and being able to balance that masculine and feminine energy. Whatever gem we can bring with us, let's bring that forward into the next cycle as we really focus on clarifying, balancing, and renewing the intellectual approach to our focus, in the way that we see things on a greater plane in the world around us, and also for our own lives. And of course, this will be a specific axis in your chart, just like Cancer and Capricorn will. So while there's the signs energetic that we'll all be focusing on, there's a part of your life that will be raised specifically. And I will be doing a report on that in the next couple of weeks. So if you want, you can sign up for my email list. Right now it's at www.alexiscoxyoga.com, and that will give you access to a previous report that's in its last couple weeks here, with Jupiter in Scorpio for all 12 signs. So where Jupiter is now and will continue to be till next fall. There's a free report that's still available where you see where it is for you, what house Scorpio is, and also what houses Jupiter rules for you. So what it's bringing into Scorpio, what you're experiencing through that house. And so it's a really powerful report, and it's still available right now until I switch it over to the Nodal Axis report. So you'll get both of those if you sign up right now. And you can also like or share or comment on this post, and feel free to share the love. I hope this is a blessed new moon for you and a very inspiring and powerful Maha Shivaratri, and I wish you well. Namaste.